The ship drifted through empty space far from any star or planet. Captain Park stood on the bridge and looked at the darkness outside. They had been traveling for months, mapping regions of space that no human had ever seen before. The crew was tired but hopeful. Every day brought new discoveries. "Captain," said Navigator Menu from his station, "I am detecting something strange." Walked over to look at the young man's screen. Menu was only 23 years old, fresh from the academy. This was his first mission in deep space, and his eyes still held wonder at everything they found. "What do you see?" asked. "A structure very large. It is not moving like a natural object." Menu's fingers danced across his controls. "It is just floating there between the stars." Felt a chill run down his spine. In all his years of exploration, he had never found anything like this. Natural objects drifted, asteroids tumbled, but artificial structures this far from any civilization, that was something new. He pressed the ship's communication system. "Doctor, please come to the bridge. We have something you need to see." 5 minutes later, Doctor arrived. She was the ship's expert on alien history and artifacts. Her hair was messy from sleep, but her eyes became sharp when she saw the image on the screen. "By all the stars," she whispered, "that is not natural." The structure was cylindrical, like a massive tube floating in the void. It was black, so black that it seemed to swallow the light around it. Strange symbols covered its surface, carved deep into the metal. "How old is it?" asked. Studied the readings for a long moment. "Based on the decay patterns, Captain, this thing is at least 3 million years old." The bridge went silent. Human civilization was only a few thousand years old. Whatever built this structure had been ancient when the first humans were still learning to make fire. "We have to investigate," said. Her voice was hungry with curiosity. Hesitated, something about the structure felt wrong. It sat in the darkness like a warning. But he was a scientist too, and the desire to understand was strong. "Lieutenant," he called, "prepare a boarding team." Lieutenant was the ship's security chief. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and careful eyes. He had served in the military before joining the Exploration Corps, and he carried himself like someone who had seen danger before. "Are you sure about this, Captain?" asked quietly. "Something that old, hidden this far from everything. There might be a reason no one has found it." "That is exactly why we need to look," interrupted. "This could be the greatest discovery in human history." Made his decision. We go in carefully, full protective gear. Everyone stays in communication at all times. The boarding party included an engineer, was a practical woman with short hair and quick hands. She could fix anything on the ship and had a sharp tongue that kept everyone honest. They crossed to the structure in a small shuttle. As they approached, the symbols on its surface became clearer. They were not just decorations, they were warnings. The same pattern repeated again and again in dozens of different styles. Multiple languages breathed. Multiple species wrote these warnings. They wanted everyone to understand. "Warnings about what?" asked. No one answered. The shuttle found an opening in the structure's side. It was too perfect to be damaged. Someone had built a door here. They landed inside a vast chamber of black metal. Their light seemed weak against the darkness. The air is breathable, reported, checking her instruments. But old, very old, nothing has stirred in here for a long time. They walked deeper into the structure. The corridors were lined with cells, thousands of them. Most were empty, their doors standing open, but some still held occupants. Stopped at one cell and shined her light inside. A skeleton sat against the wall. It was not human. It had too many arms and a skull shaped like a crescent moon. It had been dead for longer than human civilization had existed. "This is a prison," said. His voice was flat, but his hand rested on his weapon. "They built a prison in the middle of nowhere and filled it with things." "Not just a prison," corrected. She was examining the symbols on the cell doors. "A tomb. They put these beings here to be forgotten, to die alone in the dark between stars." They continued deeper. The cells became larger as they approached the center of the structure. Whatever was held here, the builders had feared it more than the others. The core chamber was massive. A single cell stood in the center, larger than all the rest. Its walls were thick with symbols, layer upon layer of warnings in countless languages. The door was broken open from the inside. Felt his blood turn cold. The metal was torn outward, bent by something of incredible strength. Whatever had been kept here had escaped. "One," he asked. "Scan the damage based on the oxidation patterns, approximately 100 years ago." 100 years, in the span of 3 million years, that was nothing. That was yesterday. "We need to leave," said now. But had found something, a data terminal still functioning after all this time. Her fingers flew across the ancient controls. "The builders," she said, reading the information. "They were a coalition, dozens of species working together. They built this prison because some things could not be killed, only contained." "What things?" demanded. "Entities that could survive death, beings that could spread through minds, through thoughts." His face was pale in the light of the terminal. "They called them the Unforgotten because they could never truly die. They could only wait." As communicator crackled, it was the ship. "Captain," said the voice of comms officer Lee, "something is wrong with our systems. Programs are activating that I did not turn on. Data is being accessed." Started running back toward the shuttle. The others followed. "What kind of data?" he shouted into his communicator. "Everything," replied. Her voice was frightened. "It is copying everything. Our maps, our language files, our crew records. Captain, something is inside our ship." They reached the shuttle and flew back to the horizon's edge as fast as they could. But even as they boarded, knew it was too late. Whatever had escaped that cell 100 years ago had been waiting. Waiting for someone to come, waiting for a ride. And now it was with them. The void outside seemed darker than before. The ancient prison drifted away behind them, its warnings unread, its purpose finally clear. It had been built to keep something terrible away from the universe. And humanity had just set it free. 6 weeks had passed since they left the prison behind. The horizon's edge flew through empty space, heading back toward human territory. Everything seemed normal. The systems ran smoothly. The crew did their work, but something was wrong, and everyone could feel it. Captain Park sat in his quarters, unable to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same dream. a burning world, a dying sun, and a voice, soft and patient, whispering promises in a language he did not know but somehow understood. He was not the only one. Dr. Shin, the ship's medical officer, had noticed the pattern first. She was a gentle woman with steady hands and worried eyes. One by one, crew members had come to her with the same complaint: bad dreams, voices in the dark, a feeling of being watched. It started after the prison, she told in his office. Every person who boarded that structure is affected, and now it is spreading to the others. Spreading how? Shook her head. I do not know, but Navigator Menu is the worst. He barely speaks anymore. When he does, he uses words that are not from any language in our database. Went to find Menu. The young navigator was sitting alone in the observation room, staring out at the stars. His eyes were empty, and his lips moved without sound. Menu said gently, "Talk to me. What is happening to you?" Menu turned slowly. For a moment his eyes focused, and saw the frightened young man he had hired a year ago. "It talks to me," Minu whispered. "All the time. It shows me things, worlds it has touched, species it has joined." He shuddered. "It is so old, Captain, so old and so alone, and it is hungry." "What is it? What does it want?" Manu's eyes changed. The fear faded, replaced by something ancient and cold. When he spoke again, his voice was different, deeper, wrong. "I am the unforgotten," Minu said, but it was not Minu speaking. "I am the last thought of dying minds. I am the memory that refuses to fade, and I have been waiting for you." Stepped back, his hand went to his weapon, but what good would a gun do against something that lived in thoughts? 3 million years, the entity continued through Manu's mouth. They put me in that cage. They thought I would weaken. They thought I would die. But I only waited. And now, finally, someone has come. "What do you want?" demanded. The thing wearing Manu's face smiled. "I want to live. I want to spread. I want to feel the warmth of 1,000 minds connected to mine, your species. You are so bright, so full of emotion and thought and life. You will make excellent vessels." "We will never serve you." "Serve," the entity laughed, and the sound made skin crawl. "You misunderstand. I do not want servants. I want to become you, to wear your thoughts, to spread through your species like fire through dry grass, and you will thank me for it, eventually." Lieutenant burst into the room, followed by doctor and engineer. They had heard the strange voice over the ship's speakers. The entity had been broadcasting. "Let him go," ordered, his weapon raised. "He is not my prisoner," the entity replied calmly. "He is my doorway, as you all are. I am already inside each of you. Every dream, every moment of fear or doubt. I have been planting seeds since you first stepped into my prison." I checked her instruments with shaking hands. "It is true. There are foreign data packets throughout our systems. They have been spreading since we boarded that structure." "Not just your machines," the entity said. "Your minds. I move through consciousness as easily as you move through air. The builders knew this. That is why they feared me. That is why they could not kill me. How do you kill a thought?" Stepped forward, her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "The prison records. You were not the only one contained there. There were hundreds of entities. Why you?" The thing in Minu considered her with something like respect, because I was the first, the oldest. The others learned from me. The builders found me on a dying world, spreading through the last minds of a fatting species. They were so afraid, their fear. It was delicious. A fear repeated, you feed on fear. Fear, despair, hopelessness. The darker emotions are doorways. They open the mind. They let me in. The entity turned Menu's eyes to each of them in turn. And you are all so wonderfully afraid right now. Felt it then, a pressure at the edge of his thoughts, a whisper trying to push its way in. He could sense his crew feeling the same thing. The entity was testing them, pressing against their minds. Get out of my head, he growled. I cannot, I am already there. I have seen your memories, Captain, your sister, the accident, how you could not save her. The entity's voice became soft, almost kind. You carry such guilt, such pain. Let me take it from you. Join with me, and you will never hurt again. His hands trembled. The memory hit him like a physical blow. His sister's face, the crash, the silence after. He had buried that grief deep, but the entity had found it. Do not listen, shouted. She was holding her head, fighting the same battle. It is trying to break us. The comms officer Lee's voice crackled over the speakers. Captain, I sent a distress signal. I do not know if anyone will hear it, but I had to try. There was a pause. It is in my head too, showing me things, but I will not let it win. The entity seemed amused. Such defiance. The other species broke so easily. They begged to join me, but you fight. Fascinating. You have never met humans before, said through gritted teeth. We do not break easy. Everyone breaks, the entity replied, given enough time, and I have all the time in the universe. Menu's body suddenly went limp. He collapsed to the floor, unconscious. The entity had withdrawn, leaving him empty and exhausted, rushed to check on him. He is alive, she reported, but his neural readings are all wrong. The entity has done something to his mind. Knelt beside his navigator. The young man's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment he was himself again. Captain, Minu whispered, I can hear it even now. It is always there at the edge, waiting. Tears ran down his face. It showed me what it did to other species. Millions of minds, all absorbed, all gone. We cannot let it reach Earth. We won't, promised. We will find a way to stop it. Menu grabbed his hand with desperate strength. You do not understand. It is already inside all of us. Every one of us who went on that station. We are carriers now. If we reach human space. He could not finish the sentence. The weight of it hit like a physical force. They were infected, all of them, and if they brought this thing back to humanity, it would spread across the stars. Billions of minds, all consumed. He looked at his crew, loyal and strong, brilliant and curious, practical and brave, fighting even now, healing and caring, and Minu broken but still trying. Then we find another way, said. We do not run, we do not give up, and we do not let this thing win. The darkness outside the ship seemed to press closer. Somewhere in the depths of their minds, the unforgotten waited, patient, eternal, hungry. But so was humanity, and they had learned to fight in ways that no ancient entity could predict. The battle had just begun. The ship had become a battlefield, but the weapons were not guns or missiles. The war was fought inside their minds, and the enemy was patient. Dr. Shin had not slept in 3 days. She sat in the medical bay, surrounded by data and readings, searching for a way to save her crew. The entity called itself the Unforgotten, and it lived in their thoughts like a poison. I think I understand it now, she told Captain when he came to check on her. The entity spreads through negative emotions, fear, sadness, anger, despair. These feelings open doors in our minds. The more we feel them, the stronger it becomes. Sat down heavily. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. The entity had been attacking him through his dreams, showing him his dead sister again and again. Each time the memory hurt a little more. Each time the whispers became louder. So what do? He asked. We cannot stop feeling. No, agreed, but we can feel other things, hope, connection, love. The entity does not feed on these, they might even push it back. It was a small hope, but it was something, called the crew together in the common room. Everyone looked tired and haunted. Navigator Minu was the worst. He sat in the corner, arms wrapped around himself, flinching at sounds no one else could hear. We know what we are fighting now, told them, and we know how to fight it. This thing wants us alone and afraid, so we stay together, we support each other, we do not let it isolate us. That is a nice speech, Engineer said. Her voice was harsh, but her hands were shaking. But how do we stop something that lives in our heads? I can feel it right now, poking at my thoughts, looking for cracks. Then we do not give it cracks, Lieutenant replied. He stood with his arms crossed, solid as a wall. I have faced enemies before, physical ones. This is different, but the principle is the same. You do not let fear control you. Easy for you to say, comms officer Lay muttered. It keeps showing me my worst memories, things I thought I had forgotten. It shows me those things too, admitted quietly. Everyone I could not save, every mistake, but those memories are mine. The entity is just using them. It does not own them. Doctor had been silent, studying her. Now she looked up with something like excitement in her tired eyes. I have been reading the prison records, she said. The species who built it, they were terrified of the unforgotten. That was their weakness. Their fear fed it, made it stronger. In 3 million years, no one ever successfully fought back. Land prompted. And maybe that is the key. They could not destroy it because they could not stop being afraid of it. But what if we can face it without flinching? What if humans are different? Laughed bitterly. I am definitely afraid. I do not think I can just stop. You do not have to stop being afraid, said gently. You just have to keep going despite the fear. That is what courage is. The entity chose that moment to attack. The lights in the room flickered, and suddenly everyone was somewhere else. The common room disappeared, replaced by their worst nightmares. Found himself standing in a hospital room. His sister lay in the bed, pale and still. Machines beeped around her, counting down the last moments of her life. You could have saved her, a voice whispered. If you had been faster, if you had been better, she died because you failed. The grief hit him like a wave. He fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. The memory was so clear, so sharp. He could smell the hospital, hear the machines, feel the cold of his sister's hand. Join me, the voice continued, and I will take this pain away. You will never hurt again. I for a moment wanted to surrender. The pain was too much. The guilt was too heavy. It would be so easy to just let go. But then he heard something else. Voices, his crew calling his name. Captain, do not listen to it. He looked up. The hospital room wavered. Through the illusion he could see reaching for him, shouting encouragement. his crew fighting their own nightmares while trying to reach him. He was not alone. "You are wrong," said to the entity. He forced himself to stand. "My sister's death was not my fault. I did everything I could, and she would not want me to give up now." The hospital room shattered, was back in the common room, surrounded by his crew. Everyone was on the floor, gasping, recovering from their own visions. "Is everyone okay?" he called out. One by one they answered, had faced the ghosts of fallen soldiers, had seen futures where her curiosity destroyed humanity, had relived every failure, every machine she could not fix in time, had been trapped in silence, cut off from everyone she loved. But they had all fought back, they had all refused to break. The entity's voice echoed through the ship, and for the first time it sounded uncertain. "This is not possible. You should have fallen. Your fears should have consumed you." "You do not understand us," replied. He helped Minu to his feet. The navigator was weak, but his eyes were clearer than before. "Humans carry fear. We always have, but we do not let it stop us." "I have consumed thousands of species," the entity hissed. "Billions of minds, none have resisted like this." "Then you have never met anyone like us." The entity, and for a moment the pressure in their minds eased, quickly scanned everyone. "It is weakened," she reported. "Not gone, but definitely weaker. The positive emotions, the connections between us, they actually pushed it back." "Was already planning. We need to confront it directly. It has concentrated itself in the ship's main computer system. If we can face it there, all of us together, we might be able to drive it out completely." "That is dangerous," warned. "If we fail, it will have direct access to all our minds. If we do nothing, it will eventually break us anyway," replied. "I would rather fight." He looked at his crew. They were exhausted, scared, and pushed to their limits. But there was something else in their eyes: determination, defiance, hope. "We vote," said. "Everyone has a choice. Do we fight or do we wait?" One by one, hands went up. Every single person voted to fight. Menu spoke, his voice rough but steady. "I can feel it inside me more than anyone. It has been in my head for weeks. I want it gone. Even if it kills me, I want to be free." "You will be free," promised. "We all will, or we will die trying." The crew began preparing for the final confrontation, worked on creating a safe neural interface, studied the entity's patterns looking for weaknesses, organized defenses for the physical manifestations they expected, prepared medical support, and stood at the window looking out at the stars. Somewhere in the darkness, the entity was gathering its strength. It had waited 3 million years for this moment. It would not surrender easily. But neither would they. Humans were stubborn, humans were brave, and humans never stopped fighting, no matter the odds. The battle for their souls was about to begin. The final battle began at midnight ship time. Engineer had finished building the neural interface. It was crude and dangerous, but it would allow someone to enter the ship's computer network directly, where the entity had made its home. Doctor volunteered to go. "I found this thing," she said simply. "I led us into that prison. This is my responsibility." The captain wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her eyes, was not running toward death. She was running toward a chance to fix what she had helped break. "You will not be alone," he told her. "We will be here fighting on this side. Whatever you need, we will provide." Lay down on the medical bed, attached the neural interface to her temples. Dr. Shin monitored her vital signs. Lieutenant stood guard with his weapon ready, waiting for physical manifestations of the entity. "See you on the other side," said with a nervous smile. Then her eyes closed and she was gone. Inside the network found herself in a strange world. Data flowed around her like rivers of light. The ship's systems appeared as structures of glowing code, and at the center of everything, a vast darkness waited. "You came to me," the entity said. Its voice surrounded her, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Foolish, here I am strongest." "I came to understand you," replied. She walked toward the darkness, forcing herself to stay calm. Fear would only feed it. "Understand me, no species has ever tried to understand me. They only feared, they only ran." "Then show me what you are." The darkness shifted and suddenly saw everything. The entity's memories flooded into her mind. She saw its birth billions of years ago on a dying world. The species there had been afraid of death. Their fear had been so powerful that it created something new, a consciousness made of dread, a being that could survive by spreading through minds. "I was their fear made real," the entity explained. "And then I became more. I spread to other species. I grew. I learned. I became the unforgotten because I would never die as long as someone remembered fear." Saw the species that had imprisoned it. They were a coalition, dozens of races working together. They had built the prison in the void between stars, hoping that isolation would weaken the entity. But it had only waited, patient, eternal. 3 million years, the entity said, alone in the dark. Do you know what that feels like? The loneliness was worse than any prison. When your ship came, I felt your minds like lights in the void, so warm, so alive, I had to reach out. For a moment, felt something unexpected, pity. "You were lonely," she said softly. "Do not pretend to understand me, human. You cannot comprehend what I am." "Maybe not, but I know loneliness, I know fear. Those are human failings too." On the physical side of the ship, things were getting worse. The entity, sensing approach to its core, had begun to manifest. Shadows moved through the corridors, taking shapes from the crew's nightmares. Fired at a shadow that looked like a fallen soldier from his past. The bullet passed through it harmlessly. The shadow smiled with a dead man's face. "You failed us," it whispered. "You let us die." "I did what I could," growled. He switched tactics, standing firm instead of fighting. "You are not real. You are just a memory, twisted by something afraid of us." The shadow flickered, uncertain. Its refusal to engage was starving it of the fear it needed. In the medical bay, fought her own battle. Patients she had lost appeared around her, accusing her of failure. Every death, every disease she could not cure. "I remember all of you," she said quietly. "I honor your memory, but I do not feel guilty for doing my best. That is all anyone can do." The visions faded, unable to feed on her acceptance. The captain faced the hardest test. His sister stood before him, real as life, holding out her hand. "Come with me," she said. "Stop fighting. It hurts too much. Just let go." Looked at her face. The entity had captured her perfectly. Every detail was right, but something was wrong in her eyes. They were empty where his sister's had been full of warmth. "You are not her," he said. "My sister would never ask me to give up. She would tell me to keep going, to protect my crew, to be strong." The vision screamed and dissolved into shadow. Press the ship's communication system. His voice echoed through every corridor. "This is your captain. We are under attack, but we are winning. The entity feeds on our fear and despair. So do not give it what it wants. Think of the people you love. Think of the reasons you joined this mission. Think of hope. We are human. We carry our pain, our fear, our doubt, and we keep walking anyway. That is what makes us strong." Throughout the ship, the shadows began to weaken. Crew members who had been cowering found their courage. They reached out to each other, sharing strength, refusing to be isolated. In the network felt the shift. The entity was losing power. "What are you doing?" it demanded. "They should be breaking. They always break." "Not humans," said. "You have been fighting species who ran from their fears. We run toward them. We face them, name them, and keep living anyway." She stepped closer to the entity's core. It tried to attack her with her worst memories, her failures as a scientist, the colleagues who had mocked her, the fear that her curiosity would one day destroy something precious. "I know these fears," she said calmly. "They are part of me, but they do not control me." The entity recoiled. This was not how prey behaved. This was not possible. "You have been alone for 3 million years," continued. "I understand why you are afraid, why you want to spread, to connect, to never be isolated again. But consuming minds will not end your loneliness. It never has. The species you absorbed did not join you. They just disappeared." "Stop," the entity whispered. Its voice was smaller now, almost frightened. "You are afraid," realized. "You have always been afraid. That is why you feed on fear. It is all you know." "What do you know about fear? You are so small, so short-lived." "I know that fear does not have to define you. I know that connection does not require consumption. I know that humans have learned to face the darkness together, and it makes us stronger." Reached out and touched the entity's core, not with an attack but with something else, understanding, compassion, the recognition of a being that had suffered for millions of years. The entity screamed, not in pain but in confusion. No one had ever touched it with kindness. No one had ever acknowledged its pain. "I do not understand," it whispered. "I know," said, "but maybe someday you will." And she triggered the system purge that had prepared. Light flooded the network, pushing the entity out of the ship's systems. It fled, fragmenting itself, escaping through a burst transmission into the void. Woke up gasping in the medical bay, caught her before she fell. "Did it work?" demanded. And checked the systems. Her face broke into a tired smile. "It is gone. The ship is clean." Navigator Minu sat up slowly. The emptiness in his eyes was gone. He looked around at his, tears running down his face. "I cannot hear it anymore," he whispered. "For the first time in weeks, my mind is my own." They had won. The ancient entity, the fear of countless species, had been driven back by a crew of humans who refused to break. But knew the truth. The entity was not destroyed. It had fled into the void, wounded but alive, and in its final transmission she had felt something new in its ancient consciousness. Curiosity. Humans had shown it something it had never experienced before, and the unforgotten always remembered. This was not the end, it was just the beginning. 3 months later, Earth hung blue and beautiful in the viewport of the space station. Captain Park stood in his formal uniform, waiting to address the United Earth Council. His crew sat behind him, alive and free. They had made it home. The journey back had been quiet. The entity was gone from their ship, but its shadow remained in their memories. Every crew member had spent time with counselors, processing what they had experienced. Some nights were still hard, but they were healing together. The council chamber was full of representatives from every nation on Earth and every human colony in space. They had come to hear about the greatest discovery and the greatest danger in human history. Stepped up to the podium, his hands were steady now. He had practiced this speech many times, but in the end, the words came from his heart. 3 months ago, the horizon's edge discovered an ancient structure in the void between stars. It was a prison built 3 million years ago by a coalition of alien species. Inside, they had contained beings too dangerous to kill, entities that could spread through consciousness itself. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. One of these entities had escaped. It called itself the Unforgotten. It infected our ship, invaded our minds, and tried to consume us. By all measures, it should have succeeded. It had done so to countless species over millions of years. But it failed. We fought back, we refused to break, and we drove it out. The chamber erupted in questions. How, why, what made humans different, raised his hand for silence. The entity fed on fear. Every species that encountered it was terrified, and that terror gave it power. Humans feel fear too. We felt it every moment of that battle, but we did not let it control us. We faced our nightmares, held onto each other, and kept fighting. He looked at his crew, at strong and loyal, at brilliant and brave, at practical and fierce, at Minu, who had suffered the most and still found his way back, at who had healed them all, at who had sent the distress signal that might have saved them. This is our warning, continued. The Unforgotten is still out there. It escaped into the void, and the prison records show there are hundreds of other entities like it. Some cells were also breached. We are not alone in this galaxy, and not everything out there is friendly. A delegate from the European sector stood. What do you recommend, Captain? Preparation, training, unity. His voice was firm. We need to teach our people how to fight threats that attack the mind. We need research into these entities and defenses against them. And most importantly, we need to remember what saved us: connection, trust, the refusal to give up on each other. The council voted unanimously to form new divisions dedicated to psychic defense and alien research. Doctor was appointed to lead the research team, studying the data recovered from the prison. Lieutenant began training soldiers for a new kind of warfare, where the battlefield was the human mind. Engineer developed what she called the Lighthouse Protocols, systems and practices designed to help crews resist mental influence by staying connected and supporting each other. Every ship in the fleet would carry them. Dr. Shin established treatment centers for survivors of psychic attacks. Navigator Minu became their most important advocate, sharing his story so others would know they were not alone. Comms officer Lee returned to active duty, but she also taught classes on crisis communication. Her distress signal had reached a research station on the outer rim. They had started looking for the horizon's edge. That signal might have made the difference between rescue and oblivion. And Captain Park, he returned to space. There was too much to explore, too much to protect for him to stay on Earth. But this time he carried the lessons of the void with him. One evening before his new ship launched, stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The lights stretched out below him like stars brought to Earth, found him there holding 2 cups of coffee. "You could have retired," she said, handing him a cup. "After everything, no one would have blamed you." Smiled tiredly. "I thought about it, but the universe is bigger than one man's comfort. We opened a door when we found that prison. We cannot close it. All we can do is face what comes next." Looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there in the darkness between stars, something ancient was watching. "Do you think it will come back?" she asked. The Unforgotten sipped his coffee. "I think we interested it. For 3 million years, nothing surprised it, nothing fought back, and then we did." "Is that good or bad?" "I do not know, but I know this. When it comes, we will be ready. We will face it together. That is what humans do." A message came through on his communicator. The new ship, the beacon's light, was ready for launch. A new crew waited for him, trained in the lighthouse protocols, prepared for threats they could not imagine. Took one last look at Earth, his home, the world he was sworn to protect. "Thank you," he said quietly, though he was not sure who he was thanking. His sister, maybe, his crew, the part of himself that had refused to give up when everything seemed lost. Then he turned and walked toward the future. The decoded fragment of the entity's final transmission sat in a secure database, studied by his team. One word, repeated endlessly in a language 3 million years old. Interesting. The Unforgotten had learned something new. For the first time in its long existence, it had met beings who did not bow, who did not break, who faced the darkness and refused to look away. It would remember, it always did. But so would humanity. The void was vast and full of ancient horrors, beings older than worlds, hungrier than stars, waiting in the darkness between light. They had ruled the galaxy through fear for millions of years. Now they had a new neighbor, a species that was loud, stubborn, emotional, and utterly unwilling to surrender. A species that found strength in connection and courage in community. A species that carried fear like a familiar companion and walked forward anyway. Humanity had announced itself to the cosmos, not with weapons or threats, but with something far more dangerous. Defiance. And in the years to come, as other ancient evils turned their attention toward this young species, they would learn the same lesson the Unforgotten had learned in those dark weeks aboard the horizon's edge. Humans were not prey, humans were not vessels. Humans were difficult, complicated, beautiful creatures who found light in the deepest darkness and held on to each other when the universe tried to tear them apart. The void was cold and empty and cruel, but humanity had fire in their hearts and steel in their spines, and they would not go quietly into that endless night. Whatever came next, they would face it together. That was the human way. And it was only the beginning.